Welcome back to Righteous Mind. We are so excited you're joining us today. I'm here with my little sis, Melissa. We are so excited to be coming back together just to, sit here and just discuss some really important topics. This new topic that we're going to be discussing I think it's a needed discussion. It's something that many uh, young women and women who have melanin, may have experienced in their life. And so we thought it would be a good time to have a discussion. And so our new series is going to be on Black Girl Adultification, the big little girl. And this is one of the topics that would bubbled up in our survey some time ago. That was a topic that people were interested in discussing. So here we are. We are about to dive in, and needless to say, there's going to be portions of this is uncomfortable, but we have to have crucial conversations because, as Melissa said in one episode, she says healing begins with hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, we have to start sharing information and educating one another on things that we're dealing with. Sometimes we may be experiencing something and don't know that there's an actual term to help us really understand what we're dealing with. So, again, we're going to be talking about Black Girl Adultification. I'm about to hand it off to Melissa. She's going to give us the definition because what we want to do in this initial episode, we want to really talk about what is adultification, what is Black girl adultification, and we really want to talk about the historical context that got us to where some of us experienced the Black girl adultification bias and phenomenon. So right now, I'm about to hand it over to Melissa so she can give
Oh,
us
I'm
that definition.
I'm so excited to be here. I love what we're doing. I love these conversations, and I appreciate that people were interested in this topic. I wish that this information would have been around when I was a little black girl or a big little black girl, however you want to say it, because I think it would have helped me to understand some of my struggles from a cultural standpoint around my struggles in school and some of my struggles in my peer group and just so many other things. And I mean, doing research and kind of learning about this has really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. And so, again, we want to make sure that what we're talking about here is helpful, beneficial, eye opening, like you said, uncomfortable. There's so many things about it that as I was learning about myself, it made me uncomfortable. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm really grateful for this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to getting into it and learning more about it as we go. And so thank you so much for such an incredible introduction. And I'm going to dive right in. So, when I did my little research and my study, what I found with adultification, we call it adultification of Black girls, or in some places you'll just see where it says adultification, or it's called adultification bias. And basically, what it is a form of racial prejudice where children of minority groups, now this is going to be typically African American children, but they've also included Palestinian children, which that would be a research study in itself, are treated by adults as being more mature than they actually are. So, any actions that are committed by minority children, particularly African American children, are deemed that would be normal, right? This is what 2 year olds
Mm.
do. This is what 5 year olds do. For this particular bias that is shown towards African American children, their behavior is not considered to be typical. It's considered to be more malicious and intentional or maliciously intentional. And they're seen as just being a lot more mature than other children, despite the fact that they may be younger. And so in my research, I had found that they were saying that this type of bias is put on children as young as 5 years old, particularly Black girls, where they're viewed as being more mature, more knowledgeable about such things as even sex. I don't know too many 5-year olds that know about sex of any race. But when we're talking about this adultification bias, it is this idea that Black girls are more mature, more sexual, have knowledge about adult things that they really don't have. And then it, in essence, allows people to treat them with harsher discipline, to be a lot more or a lot less, let me say, empathetic with them, because they're perceiving their behaviors to be intentional.
That's
So
good.
that's what I found, when I looked it up. And it was really interesting because it goes into, um, just how they're treated in school. It goes into how they're perceived, um, just in society at large. That these children are generally seen as just being, um, pretty much what I would call rebellious or a discipline problem. And so when that is the viewpoint, when that is the perspective, that,
Mm-hmm.
Black girls are discipline problems, that they're behavior problems, that they're more mature, then obviously for the adult, anything that that child does, even if it's what we would call normal development or age appropriate in the mental health world, is seen as something that needs to be, uh, handled with punitive action.
Mm.
Punitive action to the extent that there's no understanding, there's no value for this child just being a child, there's no treatment of this child as a child. It's just, oh, you're acting like a grown person, and now I've got to put you back in your place. And so that was kind of how the information that I found was coming across, where it was a lot of, these children need to be disciplined and they need to be handled harshly.
Yeah, that was, I mean, when I really began to look into the adultification, what was disheartening, I think the first time I kind of paid attention to it was stemming from when I want to say it was the situation around like Trayvon Martin and a few other young men who were murdered, who were teenagers, but they weren't, even though they were teenagers, in the media, they weren't deemed as teenagers. And so what made me kind of look to try to see what the difference was is that's when I found out that adultification does occur with Black boys, but their age is 10. So they are, at
Mm.
least they're given a different latitude or
Yeah.
grace, but even still, uh, a 10-year-old is not an adult male,
Mm-hmm.
but it is impugned on them
Mm-hmm.
and this society. And because the interesting thing is when a couple people in association with the former president's family, he was engaged in some things, and when the commentators would talk about him, this 40 something year old man, they would say like, oh, he's a young guy, he didn't really know, and this, that, and the other. So they had latitude that like the Trayvon Martin didn't have, or these other young guys. So that's when I
Mm-hmm.
first got introduced to that bias. But what became shocking to me was when I dug deeper and I found that there's a Georgetown a study, law school study, that says that they discovered that, you're right, girls they are deemed less innocent
Mm-hmm.
starting at the age of 5. And it says as young as 5.
Yeah.
And that in itself is so disturbing, and everything that you said is really just disheartening. Even and the thing about it is that we got to think about, there's a contrast. So in some of the research that I discovered, the one thing they said, a Black girl and a white girl can do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're going to view her as more pure. They're going to give her the grace that, oh, this isn't I guess for
Mhm.
lack of a better word, this was a bug, not a feature. Whereas the black girl is going to be deemed that that's just part of her character. That's just
Yeah.
part of who she is.
Yeah.
She's not going to be extended the same grace. And even some of the studies really went as far as that if they see a black girl crying and a white girl crying, they will go
Mhm.
to the white girl's aid because she seems more docile, or she seems more fragile, or she
Mhm.
seems more timid, and that the black girls are not deemed that, they're deemed more mature,
Right.
more stronger, um I guess exhibit more defiance. And the interesting thing is that unfortunately that stems back to something that's even more seedy and egregious, and that's slavery.
Mhm.
And what I found is, in trying to think about the historical context of, where did this bias come from, especially specifically in America on black girls, it stems from slavery, and what they called it the commodification of the black woman body.
Mm.
And essentially, what was happening during slavery time is that when the um, slave owners, when they decided they wanted to engage and basically rape their slaves, or it
Mhm.
was their property, so they were their property, so they were permitted to do what they wanted to do with their property, because remember, they weren't deemed as human beings, namely for legal purposes. They weren't deemed human beings because
Mhm.
oftentimes, because of the turmoil that was occurring between the masters who were sleeping with their slaves, these slaves were
Mhm.
having these children, and the wives, the white wives, who were um, basically, how it was expressed was, if they were married and their husband is doing these things with his
Right.
slaves,
Mhm.
that the good wife would not have anything to say. The good wife would stay in her place. The good
Right.
wife would be the pure, the pure docile individual, because they needed that contrast. So if
Mhm.
she's the pure, good, mild mannered, mild tempered, then the reverse, the opposite, was the black woman.
Mhm.
And so what would happen is that the women, they would ultimately, although they're not expressing it out publicly, for the society to see the angst and the anger that they're feeling about their spouse doing what they're doing,
Mhm.
they would then turn their rage on the children and or the women. And so
Mhm.
what would happen is that they would murder them. And so they didn't, we know, if we say things biblically, you would be required to either go to jail or what have you.
Mhm.
But the reason why they deemed the slaves as not human, because then that would justify, and there will be no legal repercussions if you killed them, either them being property or being less than human.
Right.
I said that to say, to set the stage of, that's what began. And so keeping this type of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, to keep the system
Mm.
the way it should be, meaning the white women, pure, going along, tolerating, putting up with their husband
Right.
going out and sleeping and raping slaves.
Right.
They had to villainize the black woman,
Mhm.
the black slave, who
Mhm.
essentially, there's something about her you were attracted to, but we can't be honest and say that's what we were doing.
Right.
We had to say they were our property. We had to
Mhm.
say we had the right to do that. And so there was this constant friction,
Yeah.
that, and it's it feels like, I mean, they were successful in establishing this system, making sure the women stayed in their place. um but I would say that it was detrimental to uh the
Mhm.
black black slaves, of course, but it definitely extremely detrimental to black women,
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint of that what ended up happening is that so it and if we know that they're not even considered human,
Right.
they had no rights,
Mm-hmm.
so they could go in and engage with anyone at any age on their land.
Mm-hmm.
So that contributed to some of the adultification that was going on. In addition, the other thing that I found out was that when if you were a slave owner and if you had a child, a black child, female, taking care of your children or helping to be like the babysitter or whatever, this is aside from them using their slaves to be a nanny, breastfeeding, etc. But if you were a child and you were there to be the playmate or to be the babysitter for their children, that showed wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So you were putting children in positions to take on adult like actions and behaviors. So
Mm-hmm.
where their children were allowed to be children, the slave children, the slave girls were not allowed to do that. They
Mm-hmm.
were going in they were either taking care of the kids or they were going in and of course doing chores, going out working in the field or cooking and doing all those things. They weren't allowed to be children.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back, you can see the line of where the Black girl adultification definitely stems back from slavery. The
Wow.
commodification of black bodies,
Wow.
the commodification of black women, black girls, it has transitioned to what we see now is the adultification
Mm-hmm. Wow.
because they were never allowed to be
Wow.
children.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about that, and so what happens if I as an adult, and here's the thing, the unfortunate thing, because it's been so pervasive for so many generations, it's
Mm-hmm.
not even just the how do I want to say it, it is not even just, for lack of a better word, the majority, the ruling class, those in
Yeah.
power, those with privilege. It is not just them who um impugn adultification on
Mm-hmm.
black girls. We, our community, we do the
Yep.
same thing.
Yep. And what I would say to that is the word conditioning.
Mm.
So when there's a famous study in mental health. It was Pavlov's. Uh, I think it was his. I want to say there were dogs, but it was this famous study in
Or what if you ring the
in
bell?
yes. Was
Mhm.
it dogs?
Is it
I get them.
Pavlov? Yes, dogs.
Pavlov. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So conditioning basically says that when a person can be conditioned to do certain types of behaviors when they are given a reward. And
Mm.
so in the Pavlov's dogs, I think is what it was. It's escaping me the whole details of it, but there was a bell that would be rung, and then there would be a reward that would come. And so
Mm-hmm.
every time that dog was put in that situation, that dog knew exactly what to do to get the reward, push the bell. And so, you hear this adultification, and what's coming to mind for me as I'm listening to you talking about the commodification of Black girls is that our children, let me say it like that, because it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't me, but kind of was me, but you know what I mean? Like our
Mm-hmm.
children were conditioned to take on adult responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
by the people who were that owned them. I mean,
Right.
just to call it what it is. They
Mm-hmm.
were conditioned to take on adult responsibilities. I'm hearing you say they were taking care of kids, they were cooking, they were cleaning. They didn't have the opportunity to be children. So what? So they were conditioned to be adult like, and now we're penalizing all of these Black girls for being adult like, if you know, because that's what I think you were going into, is that even in our own community we put some of that on them because we have been conditioned, and a lot of the things that we do as a community that came from slavery came by way of conditioning, that there was a certain condition that was put in place. I'm not going to say there was a reward, but I'm going to say that there was an expectation that we performed a certain kind of way because that's how the people that owned us caused us to perform. And that's what that conditioning. You
There
get what
was
I'm saying?
actually there was a reward. Think about it,
Well, that's true. Yep.
because there were some degree. Now, I don't want people to hear me say like, "What do you mean?"
No,
I
I get what
mean,
you're saying.
ultimately, in those type of dynamics, I don't care how horrendous they are.
Hmm.
We are how our brain is powerful,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
we God has created us so our brain so well, it
Hmm.
adapts
Hmm.
and it finds way to
To be safe in an unsafe situation. And
so
the
there.
safety becomes the reward, even if it's in an unsafe situation.
Absolutely. That's really, really good. So, yes, even though in those, and here's the thing, I think a contributing factor could have been, this is just me speculating and only speculating for me being in relationships and seeing how dynamics are. I believe some of the contributing factors as to why the wives, I forget, they call them the mistress. What do they, I forgot what they call the woman of the plantation, but when a man and a woman have had interactions, there's this chemistry there. There's this
Hmm.
dynamic that shows. And I say that to say that a slave, not saying that they was walking around like they was all that. They find ways to make their life or their situation, their family, their children, whatever they needed to do to make them safe.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story that I don't that if we talked about the dynamics of
Yeah.
the black family and the
Yeah.
things that the black women were doing to try to
Hmm.
hold their family together during slavery, because remember they were separating families.
Hmm.
um and then of course, like you said, we're paying for all the things that we tried to do in
Hmm.
a very unsafe environment.
Right.
But anyway, needless to say, we'll have to dig down to that one day. But nevertheless, Black Girl Adultification definitely is rooted,
Hmm.
its historical roots
Hmm.
comes from slavery
Yeah.
and the commodification of um black girls.
Hmm.
I just want to read this one thing I had pulled up from the Georgetown thing. It says, if you see like it's someone's they clearly pulled an excerpt from someone's interview, and they said if
Gotcha.
you see like a little white girl that's crying, people will be more sympathetic than if you see a little black girl that's crying. You adults don't have that same level of empathy for them, because it's just like, okay, like I feel bad for this little white girl because her tears carry more value than a black girl.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was really, I mean, just studying this made it's like it's so sad on so many levels. I'm gonna share a couple more things I found out.
Yeah.
And so when I did some of the things I found out, it says that yes, black girls are less innocent, more adult like than their white peers, especially between the ages of 5 to 14.
Hmm.
It says that black girls need less nurturing. I see that a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
It says black girls need less protection. I see that a lot. It says black girls need to be supported less. Black girls need to be comforted less. Black girls are more independent. Black girls know more about adult topics. And
Hmm.
black girls know more about sex.
Hmm.
That is what the perception of in these studies.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
And I
and go ahead on.
No, go ahead. Finish.
No, and I just was going to say that even in reading what these, the information that was coming from these surveys, I've said it multiple times, especially in the last few months with what's been going on with our election, and the hyper focus on that there's a Black woman. We didn't make
Mm,
the 1/8 rule. We did not make the 1/8 rule or the one drop rule. We only live by the rule that was created by those in power. But anyway, nevertheless, I think about what Malcolm X said. He said this
mm.
over what, 40, 50 years ago?
Yeah.
He said the Black woman, and we gotta say include females, period, is
Mm-hmm.
the most disrespected, neglected, and unprotected individual in America. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
say it again. And I'm going to put the quote up so you can see it's his words, not
Okay.
mine. He said that the most disrespected, the most neglected, and the most unprotected individual in America is the Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he was writing a study and didn't realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Eh, Go ahead on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say which those. So the fact that Black girl adultification exists, it bleeds into creating these various archetypes of our
Mm-hmm.
personality.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And I was going to say, when you were talking, I came across something that said that Black girls were perceived to act like animals and need to be tamed, and that Black girls are perceived to be unfeminine, which I thought
And
was
what?
really interesting. Unfeminine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfeminine.
That would be like the so in when in that type of archetype they're referencing people like when Viola Davis played the person in The Help. It was Viola
Hmm.
Davis, but you remember The Help?
Yes.
Or what was it? I can't think of her name. I
I
feel
can't
so
think of her
bad.
name either,
Oh,
but I know who you're talking about.
Octavia
Olivia.
Spencer.
Yes, Octavia Spencer. Yes.
Octavia Spencer. So those type of Medea, the one that Tyler Perry plays, those type of archetypes is those are not feminine.
Yep.
But then it goes the next extreme is, so if we're not feminine, then we are loosey goosey. We're Jezebel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have no morals, no values, no boundaries. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And then if we don't fall into that archetype, then guess what else we are? The angry Black woman.
Yep. Which is very prevalent in our culture today.
I didn't realize how that was such a thing. Like, in my work, in my years of working, of course, when I first started working, the culture was very different. No one was even remotely trying to be mindful of their behaviors, especially those who are in power, those with privilege. Yeah, whatever, you better deal with it. That was the mentality. But I say that to
Mm-hmm.
say I didn't realize just how much that trope
Mm-hmm.
exists. When I say to you, I don't know how many times I've been told by a superior who was in power, of privilege, a person of privilege,
Mm-hmm.
who told me, "Oh, you need to either people think you're mad, um, you got to
Mm-hmm.
kind of tone down how you speak to people, um, just a myriad of things." Now, I think to myself, like, for the most part, I'm fine. You leave me alone, I'm okay. Now, I will say I'm the type of person, generally I'm going to speak up, and most time I'm probably advocating for other people. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speak out. I'm going to speak truth to power, so forth and so on. Now, I'm not loud, I'm not obnoxious, but yeah, you're going to know I'm saying something. But
Mm-hmm.
in a professional environment, I'm doing my job. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And it wasn't until there was a young lady who used to attend my church. She was a nurse. Um, and I was working at a popular cancer hospital here in Columbus. And I was working in the administration office. And so she was a nurse there. And I mean, when I say she is soft spoken, sweet as she want to be, gentle, just just a sweet young woman. And that doesn't mean I'm not sweet, but just some people you just like, oh, they're just so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, she came to my desk, and she walks, and she would come to my office ever so often because she knew I go to church, and I was there.
Mm-hmm.
She come up to my desk, and her eyes, you can tell her eyes, like she's about to bust into tears. And she was like, and it's, of course I'm at work, but she was like, Minister Regina, can I talk to you? And at that point, I'm like, okay, yeah. So I walk out, I walk to a place where it's kind of quiet and private. And she was like, I just got my performance review from the nurse manager. And she said she's going to tell me that I'm rude, that I need to watch my tone. And she began to list all the things that this lady said she needed to do. She
Mm-hmm.
was too aggressive. She was too assertive. And I'm sitting here looking at her like, who? Like, I said, she said this about you? She was
Right.
like, yes. I was floored. And in that moment, my mindset changed. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized, oh no, I will no longer internalize what
Mm.
people are trying to project on me, how they think I should behave.
Right.
Because here I'm talking to a young lady who I know is soft spoken, who I know do not raise her voice. Who, you understand what I'm saying? I've seen her in
Yes.
a myriad of environments,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not even her persona.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I get upset just even thinking about it, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking like myself, like, okay, even though I'm gonna take you saying that to me. Okay, fine. All right, fine. I still can make
Mm-hmm.
some adjustments, but whatever. But to
Mm-hmm.
say that about her, I realized, no, this is what you guys have been putting on us for so long, and we've been carrying it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been internalizing it. We've
Yep.
been adjusting and readjusting, hence code switching.
Mm.
Because we cannot show up to be our true and authentic self. Because why can't we? Because think about, Black Girl Adultification didn't just show up. It's been going on. I
Mm-hmm.
have multiple experiences being called fast, and this is, and again, it goes back to, it's not just that those who were in power, the ruling class,
Right.
those who had the privilege, who was putting it on us initially, but in our own community, we do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I guess ultimately, I'm calling us out on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're placing all, I think about myself. I think about, when my daughter is, I got a teenager, and we got one more year, and she'll be on somebody campus. But I think about myself, and I literally I was having a moment, and I was saying to myself, you know what? I've been doing this for at least 49 years. I've been taking care of, being an adult, taking care of people since I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Being responsible, making sure I had my key, making sure the door was locked, making sure when I babysat you, making sure I knew how the milk's supposed to be, make
Yeah.
sure I learned how the milk wasn't too hot on my hand before I gave it to
Mm-hmm.
you, learning how to make sure I knew how to change your diaper and wipe you properly,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that babysit. You understand what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then you're giving me adult responsibilities, and not only are you giving me adult responsibilities, but I better do it right. And I'm not saying this like I'm an anomaly. I know a lot of my friends
Oh yeah.
growing up that was doing that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I better do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so now you're telling me to be an adult, and do all these things and take care of all these responsibilities. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't teach our children how to do chores. I'm not saying none of those things at all. Please don't get, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that many things that we are expecting from children, and in our culture, we do a way more, have far more expectations on our females than we do on our males. And it's showing. And we have that expectation, and then we turn around when you've been making her play grown up role, then you're gonna turn around and call her fast.
There you go.
I wasn't fast when you was telling me to cook dinner for everybody.
Right.
When I was in the kitchen cooking a whole meal for you, your husband, and my siblings. Was I fast then? So I'm calling us out as a community that we also have impugned that on our girls as well. But now that we know the history, where it came from, we can do some things to make it different. I'm sorry, let me get off my box.
No. I think that's good.
Because we have these things that's been put in place for so long, and and it has impacted us all. It's a lot being responsible for a lot of people at a young age.
Yeah.
And being afraid you're going to get in trouble if you don't get it right.
Or to then
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go. No, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. And I said, and then on top of that, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing what you told me to do, but then I'm fast. I'm grown. Go sit your grown ass down. I didn't say the bad word. I spelled it.
Or you're angry. And who shouldn't be angry when their childhood has been stolen? And we don't understand that maybe there is some anger in African American women, justifiably. Not that we want to be called angry, right? But you've got to understand that anger is a very natural response to something being unfair. That is the function of anger, that when I'm experiencing something that feels unfair and unwanted, I'm going to be angry.
You're going to feel some type of way.
Right. So it is possible that there are a lot of angry Black women in the world. Not so much, and I'm trying to be delicate in how I say that, because I don't want it to go against what we're talking about. But I also want to bring in this reality that, well, you should be angry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to normalize the fact that you should be angry. You've had to take on adult. You've had to take on adult responsibilities at a young age. You've had to miss out on opportunities to play, to be a kid, and to do what kids get to do. And maybe it's little white kids they get to do. They get to grow up and play and have fun and all of that stuff while you in the kitchen cooking and cleaning. You should be angry about that, because that's not considered normal and it's not considered appropriate.
That's good.
Teach your kids chores and all of that, but understand that they need to also be able to be a kid. And if we're not allowing our kids to be kids, and then they're becoming adults, and then they're engaging in adult activities as a result of us putting this adult expectation on them, and then they turning around and telling us to shut up and body slamming us on the floor.
Oh, Jesus. Don't body slam me.
I'm just saying.
I hear you.
We've got to also normalize that anger and not make it seem like it's some type of problem. No, it's the result of you missing out on something and not having your needs met. Because the reality is if I'm spending all my time meeting other people's needs, when do I get my needs met?
That's good. That's
so
really,
I have
good.
Every right to be angry. I'm 15 years old and I've practically raised 2 grown people.
Come on in here.
I have every right to be angry. And it doesn't have to be me, and that doesn't have to be my personality. That is the result of my experiences. And we've got to
That's
be able
good.
to separate that, because it's not just some angry Black woman. It's a Black woman who's experiencing anger as the result of how she was conditioned.
That's good.
Let me
Condition.
say it like that.
Condition. I mean, no, that's really,
Condition.
really good. And I mean, people, as y'all listening to us, I mean, what we're saying is we need to start really looking at the roots of things that has contributed to a myriad of things. You know, our
Correct.
last series was on church hurt. Listen, some of this has some contributing factors.
Mm-hmm.
Things, our experiences
Mm-hmm.
shape how we respond and react. Now, of course, we have to, when we realize that, we have to be able to step back and realize there are some things we have to make adjustments. You know, it's I shouldn't mistreat other people because of my traumas that I've experienced. That is so true. And I do, when I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that, I need to start doing the work. But part of the problem is that we in our community don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm so glad you framed it like that, Melissa, because to be honest, I hadn't even thought about that. That you're right. I mean, you know, you here in our community, who is the best example of somebody's whose childhood was robbed and they made it very apparent in everything they did became once they became an adult?